Right, so we call this a mismatch. We're mismatched to being inactive. Our bodies never evolved to be inactive. And so as a result, we don't turn on all these mechanisms that keep us healthy. And so what we do is we get sick if we're inactive, and we go to the doctor, and we get pills and various other sorts of treatments to keep us going. But what exercise does is it increases what we call your health span, right? The amount of the years that you live without any disease or disability. So people today are living longer than before, that's for sure. Although not that much longer, actually, than hunter-gatherers. But they're also living more and more years with disabilities. So the average American now lives to be 78, but the last 16 years of their lives are spent on average, this is average, so many people have more, with some serious kind of chronic disability. Yeah. And most of those disabilities would be prevented to some extent, if not to a large extent, by having been more physically active earlier in their lives. You're doing what we call hyperbolic discounting, right? You're choosing to do something now because you get benefit in the future. But it's also true that it's not like you like if you exercise now, you're going to live to be 100 later. You have to keep doing it. So we call this the active grandparent hypothesis. So humans are unusual in that we evolved to live after we stop reproducing. So most animals, right, as soon as they stop having babies, natural selection doesn't care about them at all, right? Yeah. They're just gone, right? But humans are different. A typical hunter-gatherer will live about 2 decades at least after they stop reproducing. And but they're not just like retiring and going to, Florida or whatever, where the south of Spain or whatever it is you're doing when you retire, or sitting back and just watching the television. They're still active, right? They're still hunting, they're still gathering. And then that physical activity turns on all those repair and maintenance mechanisms, which keeps people healthy. So the trick is not to just, think, well, I exercise when I'm young and that'll keep me healthy when I'm older, is to continue to stay physically active as you age. And there's plenty of epidemiological data that supports this. There are studies which show that as people age, the benefits of exercise actually become bigger, not smaller, in terms of their long-term health.
Because my dad says to me, I've never seen my dad go to the gym, and he now says to me, he's 76. He either says, it's too late for me to be doing this, or
not true.
Exercise is for young people.
Not true. Absolutely not true. Quite the reverse.
So what would it do to his body then if he started to exercise?
Well, I mean, I'm not a gerontologist, so I'm not an expert on. And furthermore, everybody's a bit different in terms of what their health issues are and their fitness levels are. But the benefits are the same for everybody. When you're physically active, you start pumping blood around your body. You turn on all these proteins.
But why is it more for him then? Why would it be more beneficial for?
Well, because as we age, senescence starts to catch up with us. Aging is as the years tick by, right? Yeah. Senescence is the deterioration that is correlated with age. And what exercise does is it slows senescence. So like one of the big problems that people run into as they age in our society is the muscle wasting. The technical term is sarcopenia. Sarco means flesh in Greek, and penia means loss, so flesh loss. It kind of sounds awful, right? It does. But sarcopenia is what happens when people get old and they get frail and they can't do stuff, right? So it gets hard to, get off the toilet or get out of a chair. It gets hard to lift your bags. And, everything becomes a little bit more difficult. And when that happens, a vicious cycle sets in, because then you do less of those things and you become even more frail. And we all have seen this, people, elderly individuals who really struggle to do basic things, and their bodies deteriorate at a rapid rate. You can. It's not causal; it's correlative. But the speed at which people walk is very predictive of how long they're going to live as they age, right? And it's not because walking fast is like necessarily all that great for you. It's just a good signpost it's an indicator of how much your body is deteriorating. So as people age, staying physically active slows the rate at which all the systems in their body senesce, and it helps them stay active and healthy and helps them stay mentally alert. It slows dementia, it slows, heart disease, it slows metabolic disease. I mean, I don't even know where to stop the list. Yeah. I think one of the most compelling reasons to help motivate people, because, especially when you're young, but also as you age, when you're 20, you think, okay, it doesn't matter. But exercise when you're 20 can have huge effects, for example, on depression. So when you're physically active, you produce all kinds of neurotransmitters, right? I produce dopamine, which is the molecule that basically says, do it again, right? I produce serotonin, which is important for regulating mood and anxiety and frustration and anger. I produce, I guess we call it epinephrine. I think you call it adrenaline here in England, right? Which, again, makes you kind of more active. I produce brain-derived neurotropic growth factor, which produces more neurons in my brain. It keeps my brain growing. I produce opioids, right? Which would be illegal. Oh, absolutely. You're producing all kinds of endogenous opioids, which it's one of the reasons why, you can run, like I don't know if you ever run a marathon or anything like that, but you produce endocannabinoids, which is the same stuff when you smoke cannabis, right? It gives you runner's high, right? The point is that your brain produces this cocktail of molecules that make you feel good. We have data, right? There are, I don't know how many, there are at least, we just did a big study in our lab, but a meta-analysis, but there are dozens, maybe many dozens of studies, prospective gold standard studies where they take a group of individuals who are all clinically diagnosed with major depressive disorder, right? So these are people who are struggling, right? And half of them are assigned to exercise, and then half of them are assigned some kind of pharmaceutical, right? And in almost all of the studies, the exercise has more of an effect than taking a pharmaceutical. And we actually understand them. So we have data that tells us the prevalence of the effectiveness. Yeah. We also have data which tells us the mechanisms. We understand some of the molecular mechanisms. The self-medication that occurs, right? So we know that this is very potent effects, and yet how often when somebody goes in to see a counselor or a psychiatrist, often nobody even asks whether they're being physically active. They don't ask whether they're exercising. And it's just a failure of our medical system, our medical systems, to recognize just how important physical activity is for so many aspects of our body. But again, let's be careful, right? Let's not sell this as a. I think I'm overdoing this in a way. It's not a magic bullet, right? It doesn't mean that everybody who gets depression will instantly have their depression gone. It increases your exercise decreases your vulnerability. It can help, but it's not like a magic bullet. But it helps. Just there are no magic bullets. People who exercise also still die, But it is one of the most potent ways to reduce your vulnerability to a wide range of diseases, and in many cases helps you. It can also help treat a number of diseases. It's also a question of priority. And how we evaluate our priorities. And again, I'm often too busy to, and I want to make those excuses, but then I find ways to force myself because it's my job, and I don't want to be a hypocrite. But B, I've decided as I get older that there are two things I just don't like to compromise on, and one is sleep, and the other is exercise. I just, they're important to me, and I'm just not and also when I'm not exercising, I'm not doing the right thing by my family as well. So, but I think everybody who does that probably could think about how they could adjust other things they do in their lives. But if you're commuting and you have kids and whatever, it is tough. There's no question about it, because we live in a world where not only is physical activity unnecessary, sometimes you have to go out of your way to do it. Physical activity does reduce stress. There's no question about it. I think everybody knows that. Right? Going for a walk, everybody knows going for a walk outside, even on a gray, rainy day, is better than not going for a walk, right? So, I don't have a simple answer to that one, obviously, but we also, I think, as a society, we need to find ways, and as friends and neighbors and whatever, to help each other. Again, we evolved to be physically active for two reasons, and two reasons only, right? When it's necessary or when it's rewarding. So we have to help either make it necessary and rewarding, and there are many ways to do that, but there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Can we talk then about the power of being sedentary? You've just said that sleep is really important for you. Can you tell us, first of all, what you've done to make sure that you prioritize sleep and get the right sleep that works for you?
Well, actually, interesting. We're all told that we, 8 hours of sleep a night.
Yeah.
That's just not true, actually. And but if you look at epidemiological data, again, large samples, right, where you graph how much sleep you get a night and how long you live, it's a U-shaped curve. So people who don't get much sleep, they do run into trouble. There's no question about that. People who sleep too much also run into trouble. That's usually because there's something wrong that's making them sleep too much. But the bottom of the curve for almost everybody, for most populations, and then there's variation, everybody's different, so you might be different from me, is about 7 hours. So it turns out that 7 hours is, if you want to say an optimum, base bottom of that curve, 7 hours turns out to be the optimum. Furthermore, if you look in and we think, modern world, we have iPhones and television and electric lights and all that, and that's ruined sleep, right? Edison, ruined sleep, right? Populations which have none of these things, right? There's no electricity, no iPhones, no whatever. They sleep less than 7 hours on average. Like the hunter-gatherers sleep 6.5 hours.
Is that right?
They don't nap either, for the most part. And some of them are early risers and some of them are, night owls and whatever. And there's always somebody awake making noise in camp, etc. But it turns out that, the idea that, we evolved to sleep 8 hours is a bit of an exaggeration. And that what happens, though, is that what I call the sleep industrial complex. But there are people who out there to make money off this, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you're not getting enough sleep, so buy this product, buy this, this strip you can put on your nose, pills, of course, which are terrible for you. I mean, hypnotic. The pills that sleeping pills are really bad for you. And then we this mattress, or you have to get a special curtains to block out every photon of light or whatever. Because we're making people stressed about sleep, but guess what stress does? Stress prevents you from sleeping. So the more we make people stressed about their sleep, the less well they're going to sleep, and it just drives a vicious circle, and then the more they're going to go and run and buy your product. So we just, yes, too little sleep is a problem. People who don't get enough sleep we need to find ways to help them. But making people anxious about sleep is, I think, exactly the wrong way to help them sleep.
I find if I wake up in the night, the one thing that stops me getting back to sleep is the fear of not getting back to sleep.
That's right. Yeah. And they oh my God, something's wrong. I woke up in the middle of the night. But everybody wakes up in the middle of the night sometimes. It's completely normal. If you're less worried about it, your cortisol levels won't rise and prevent you from sleeping, because cortisol is an arousal hormone, right? When you're stressed, so cortisol doesn't cause you to be stressed. Cortisol comes up when you are stressed. When I'm teaching, I actually showed this wonderful experiment where they had a bunch of people jump out of airplanes, and you can measure cortisol in saliva. So they had them spit in little tubes as they were getting in the airplane and about to jump out. And of course, the first time they jumped out, their cortisol levels were literally sky high, right? They're like, oh my God, I'm going to jump out of an airplane. They're really high cortisol levels. And then what they did is then, like every week, they repeated the jump, right? And by 7 weeks, there was no cortisol, right? They're still jumping from the same height, but they were no longer stressed because they're like now, oh yeah, I'm going to jump out of a plane again. So, but cortisol, turns on your fight and flight mechanisms, right? It makes you, helps you run away from the lion or whatever. And all of that prevents you from sleeping. So, the trick to helping people sleep is to help them avoid stress.
And on a similar note, talking about sleep and getting the right rest and recovery, I have a few friends, when I talk to them about exercise, they say, well, I'm just too tired. And I often say to them, if you start exercising, I bet you'll be less tired.
This is true.
Is it true?
Yes. Because exercise, there's different kinds of fatigue, right? So one kind of fatigue is the fatigue from, I did a really long run this weekend, right? And I was tired afterwards. That's because I ran a ridiculous number of miles, right? But that's but there's the other fatigue, which is sort of more kind of a malaise, that kind of, just feeling lack of energy and all that kind of stuff. But exercise, of course, liberates all that energy. It turns on, your endorphins, and it turns on growth hormone, GH, which gives you this energy surge. Again, this is part of the issue, right? Which is that we didn't evolve to say, I feel awful. I think I'm going to go for a run.
Yeah.
Nobody in the Paleolithic ever did that, right? They think, oh, God, I feel awful. I'm going to go for a pointless 5-mile run. Nobody did that, right?